Hello and welcome. This is Health and Wellbeing, and I am Lois Apasambo. Today on the program, we will be talking about pneumonia, which so many people called it's just cold. Well, for your information, pneumonia kills more children than any other infectious disease, claiming the lives of over 700,000 children under the age of 5 every year, and around 2,000 every day. That's an estimate. And this includes over 200,000 newborns worldwide. And over here in Nigeria, about 160,000 children under the age of 5 also die of pneumonia every year. However, almost all of these deaths are preventable with the right information and the right interventions. Today on the program, we have a health expert that will answer all our questions on pneumonia, whether the myths and whatever stories you have heard on pneumonia. But before we go into that section, I went around some locations and asked people what they know about pneumonia, and this is what they had to say.
Pneumonia is a disease that can kill very fast. Is a kind of dangerous disease that if someone have it or contact it, if you not take of your time or to go to hospital to treat it, it could lead to death. When you take of cold like coke where the cold, or take a drinking of water that is cold, if rain beat you and you are cold and you not cover yourself, it will lead to pneumonia. And when you have pneumonia, it will lead you to cough, like you will be coughing, your chest will be paining you.
Pneumonia is a deadly disease usually caused by cold, intake of cold drinks, and mostly exposing the body due to during rainy season. When you expose your body during rainy season, it can cause pneumonia. And the side effects of pneumonia is lack of healthy breathing. That person cannot breathe well when you have pneumonia, and also chest pains and severe headache, cough also. Those are the side effects of pneumonia. And it is being recorded that over 1.5 million people have died due to this disease because it is very, very deadly. And its side effects in your body can actually lead to death.
Pneumonia is a deadly disease caused by cold. It most affect the chest, and it's happened during rainy season and harmattan. It happens when we expose the body when we expose our body, we expose it to cold. When the cold enters the body, it affects the chest. So that's what causes pneumonia. And too much of cold water, staying cold much, is very, very bad because it causes pneumonia.
The disease caused by cold, taking too much cold drinks or water, or exposing your body to cold. When I was pregnant, when I went for antenatal, they told me that if I take too much cold drinks, too much cold water, it will affect the child and she will have pneumonia. It will lead to loss of appetite, fatigue, dehydration, death.
Well, that was just a survey on what people know about pneumonia, and I know quite a number of people may also have such information or have ideas of what pneumonia is. Well, right now in the studio, I have Dr. Akonde Aderonke. She is the Divisional Head, Communicable Diseases with the FCT Primary Healthcare Board, and she's here to enlighten us better on pneumonia. You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for taking our time to be here with us.
You.
So we've actually watched what people say or what they think pneumonia is, but I would like us to get it very clear from the experts. What is pneumonia? And I'd like you to break it down for us, like to the barest minimum for people that wouldn't have all the medical expertise and all the medical jargons.
Okay, thank you very much. Pneumonia is one of the contagious diseases. That means the disease you can catch from one person to another through having contact with the person, and we call it infectious diseases. And basically, they are diseases that you can contact by having contact with someone who manifests the symptoms of this disease. And not through that alone, even by mere contact with items that the person infected with pneumonia uses, one can also get infected. When you move closer to the person through, and the person coughs, sneezes, or even talk to your face, one can contact pneumonia through these means. So it is caused by a lot of pathogens, a lot of germs, which we call virus, bacteria, or even fungal infection. So they are basically infectious diseases and can be transmitted from one person to another, and it infects chest and other parts of the body.
Okay, so just like you said now, it's making people begin to ask, okay, it's caused by some are fungal, some are viral, and some are bacterial. And okay, so let's take from the survey that we took on the opinions of people of what they think or what they think they know pneumonia is. Quite a number of them said it's caused by cough, it's caused by cold, it's caused by cold. And that's a general perception that people have about pneumonia. And you coming to say, okay, it's caused by bacteria or a virus, okay, it makes people wonder, so how does this work? There's most definitely a connection between pneumonia and cold, because I know some of the symptoms are similar. But I'd like you to just clarify for us, you know.
Okay, yeah, it was quite interesting listening to what people are saying regarding pneumonia. Pneumonia is not caused by drinking cold water. Okay. And that is the common myth about this particular disease, because people believe when you take cold drinks, you are likely to be infected. No. Though it might worsen the already disease condition if the pneumonia is present in an individual. Basically, just like I've said, pneumonia is caused by germs. And such germs has associated risk factors that can actually predispose a person to pneumonia. And these risk factors include extreme of ages, like children below the age of 5 and elderly above the age of 65 years. So if you have this group of people, they are at risk of developing pneumonia. Also, there are other disease conditions, like any disease that could reduce one's immunity. That means if you have low immune status, you are predisposed to pneumonia. So it's not just about drinking cold water. Then also there are other environmental factors like polluted environment, even indoor environment. If your room is not well ventilated, you are likely to develop pneumonia, particularly if all those germs that we mentioned are present in your environment. And if there is history of contact with someone with pneumonia, you are likely to come down with the same. It is not basically as a result of cold water drinking. But if you have the symptoms and you drink cold water, it can actually, you know, worsen the disease and the symptoms. And people also relate it to cold environments. So, which is also the same thing, because some of these germs they strive well during the weather condition. Okay. So they are not totally wrong, but it is not the main cause.
Okay, so now this clarifies it a lot better, because you know, even when we have cold and catarrh, it's mostly associated with the rainy season or the dry Harmattan season, you know, and people just say, if I leave my body open, I just get cold. And so it's the same perception that we carry with pneumonia, and say, if you leave your body open, you will get pneumonia. But it's good that you explain it better, that it is because they thrive better in such conditions. That's why it's more susceptible or more vulnerable at these times. Now, like I asked now, for pneumonia, you said there's some viruses and there's some that are bacteria. What's the difference between the pneumonia that is a bacteria caused and the one that is virus caused?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very important question, but it is actually very difficult for you to differentiate between pneumonia caused by bacteria and the other one caused by viruses or fungi. So in order for you to know which particular type of pneumonia you are dealing with, you have to be diagnosed first. And the process of diagnosis takes a lot of, a lot of activities, a lot of processes. You have to go through history taking, and beyond that, you have to go through a kind of laboratory investigation that will confirm, okay, this is a classical case of fungal or bacterial infection. But most commonly, there is what we call strep pneumonia. That's the most commonest one that normally leads to community infection. And what do I mean by community infection? That means if one person in your environment gets infected with that bacteria, it is easily spread to every other person in the community. And before you know it, it covers a whole lot of population. So there is another one we call Haemophilus influenza. These are medical jargons and terms which the people may not be
really
able to understand. So they are just various forms of bacteria.
Okay, so now that brings us to signs and symptoms. Okay, let's start with what are the signs and symptoms that one would see and feel that this is pneumonia and not just the common cold, because they kind of are similar, and that's why people actually mistake both of them.
Yeah, this is a very important aspect, because pneumonia manifests mainly in the young age and the elderly. And that does not mean that an adult cannot manifest with the disease. So now I'm going to group the symptoms into what you can feature, what you can see classically in an adult or elderly, or those ones you can actually try to look out for if you have a child that is under the age of 5. So for the under the age of 5, your child might present with fever. What do I mean by fever? High temperature. The body is very hot. The symptoms are actually similar to that of malaria, but it is quite different, because the fever in pneumonia is quite higher than that of malaria. So when you see a child with a very high body temperature, so you should be thinking about malaria. Such a child will refuse to suck. Some of them are on breastfeeding. They will refuse to suck. So they will feel so lethargic, they will feel so weak and acutely ill looking. They are actually toxic when you see such a child. So you should be thinking towards malaria. Pneumonia, sorry. Then if you see symptoms that actually looks like malaria in them, it could be pneumonia. Then there are some chest symptoms in children. If a child is having like movement of the chest, like difficulty with breathing, you could perceive from the way a child breathes. The breath will be so difficult, and you see the inward and outward drawing of the chest muscle. You see the skin will be depressed at a point. Then later on, it bulges out.
That's at the chest?
Yes, at the chest.
Okay.
That child is actually having it difficult to breathe. The nose, the tip of the nose flares up as if there's a pump blowing hair out of the nostril. So such a child is having pneumonia. So apart from this, there are also symptoms of general body pains. There is lack of strength, and for adults could also manifest with all these symptoms. But if you see symptoms that are similar to malaria in you, in which you become so breathless and you present with cough, usually the cough with pneumonia are productive of sputum. Whenever a patient with pneumonia coughs, it brings out something. So that is an indication that this disease could be pneumonia. So it's not an ordinary malaria or any other disease. So it could be pneumonia. And the fever is also is manifestable in adults, just like in the children, as stated earlier on. Then there is in the children now, there could be malnutrition. That child will not feed well.
Yes.
And you just look at the child, it becomes, or she becomes emaciated, and there's a lot of muscle wasting and all that. So these are the symptoms that you can envisage in someone with malaria, pneumonia. Sorry.
Okay, so you spoke about sputum when someone coughs. There are quite some people actually also when they have the common cold, they spit out some kind of sputum.
Yeah.
But for pneumonia, is there like a particular way you would see this sputum that will make you know that this is just not normal cough? Is there a color or is there a way that it will look?
Yeah, the phlegm or the sputum produced during pneumonia cough could be grayish, it could look like pus.
Okay.
Yeah, it could look like pus, but sometimes it could be clear. So it doesn't really indicate, it depends on what type of germs is responsible for a particular pneumonia. So you cannot actually use the appearance of sputum to describe what type of pneumonia or whether it's pneumonia or non-pneumonia, because there are other arrays of diseases that could present with the same sputum. But what is important is that when you have fever, high-grade fever, with cough that is productive or sputum, and you feel so weak and sick, so this could be malaria, pneumonia. Oh
I think you have something with malaria. Okay, well, that is good. And I'd like us to talk about prevention, but we need to go on a very short break. And when we return from this short break, our discussion will continue with the preventive measures we can take to prevent ourselves from catching pneumonia.
We are a nation blessed with people of diverse cultures, religions, languages, and opinions. It is ironic that we are now being ripped apart by our greatest strength, our diversity. We have allowed intolerance, insensitivity, bigotry, and nepotism to blind our vision of the greatness we can achieve working together as one. We may not have the same culture, nor religion, nor language, but we all belong to the same nation by the divine will of God. We did not choose to be Nigerians. Nigeria chose us. This nation is our divine heritage, and if we open our eyes, we would realize that what divides us pales in comparison to what unites us. And by the comparison and conciliation of our differences, we will grow until our differences disappear. Our unity cannot be willed by mere declarations, nor do we get unity by ignoring the questions that beg for answers. We must celebrate our diversity and debate our differences without fracturing our unity. Our strength is not in our numbers, but in our unity, because even the weak become strong when united. Nigeria unite. This message is brought to you by Abuja Broadcasting Corporation, owners and operators of ASO Radio 93.5 FM Abuja, ASO Television Star Times Channel 127, Free TV Channel 507, Free TV Channel 507, People's TV Channel 285, and UHF Channel 38.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. If you're just joining us, this is Health and Wellbeing on ASO Television. Now, before we went on the break, we have been discussing pneumonia with Dr. Akonde, and she has been giving us insights on what pneumonia is and is not. And before we went on the break, she made us understand that pneumonia is not caused by cold, but by some viruses and some bacteria. And before we went on the break, I said we we're going to talk about prevention. Okay. What are the preventive measures people can take to prevent themselves from getting pneumonia?
Okay, thank you very much. Prevention, they said, is better than cure. So it is good to prevent so that you don't spend so much and even lose your life suffering from a particular disease. So we normally encourage people to maintain good hygiene in order to prevent pneumonia, because most of these are related to poor hygienic practices. When you are in close contact with someone, you make sure you maintain some distance, just like all the preventive measures for COVID is actually applicable for pneumonia. So you don't stay close to people to breathe, to talk, to sneeze, and even to cough into your face, because you don't know if they are having the pneumonia germs in them. That's number one. Then secondly, we encourage mothers, caregivers to immunize their children with an anti-pneumonia vaccine. We call it pneumococcal vaccines. And thankfully, we have our primary health care centers with these vaccines available. All you need is 3 doses for your child under the age of 5. Even right from birth, all these vaccines are given to children in under different schedule. So you'll be given the time to come for the next one after taking one. So it is actually a preventable disease, and it is highly deadly. And you know, when something kills people and you know it is preventable, that is the most agonizing thing about the disease. So despite the fact that over 160,000 Nigerian child under the age of 5 die yearly due to this pneumonia, we still have vaccines in our facility, in our health centers, in our clinics that could prevent it. But a lot of people ignore, they don't count it as important. So that's why they leave it out. And whenever a child comes down with pneumonia, they hardly survives it. So that is why it is important to encourage our mothers to immunize their children. And when I mentioned hygiene, what do I mean? Simple hand washing. Apart from keeping distance, ensure you wash your hands regularly. Avoid touching surfaces, because you might actually get pneumonia right from surfaces where someone with malaria, with pneumonia coughs or sneezes on, even without the presence of that person in that environment. So it is that contagious. So we should avoid touching surfaces, and if we do, so we should ensure that our hands hygiene are kept regularly with soap and water. You can keep your hands clean. There is a common saying that your destiny is in your hands. You know, these our hands can prevent a lot of diseases, and the more you wash it, the more you are keeping yourself away and off several diseases that are killer diseases.
Yeah, so you spoke about vulnerability, you know. Are there diseases that are like predisposing diseases that would actually make someone very vulnerable to having pneumonia?
Yeah, quite right. There are diseases that can predispose someone to having pneumonia. Just like I've stated earlier on, if someone suffers from HIV/AIDS, you know, it has to do with immunity. I mentioned low immunity as a predisposing factor for pneumonia earlier on. So that is number one. There are other conditions like heart condition or even ordinary chest anomaly, which is abnormal chest formation in children, or even ordinary nasal or airway distortion if there is a problem with this passage, because naturally God created us and our airway to be able to shed off many bacteria, viruses, and other germs from our airway, from getting to our lungs. So if there are issues with this airway, they can actually predispose someone to having pneumonia. So any condition, or maybe someone with high chemotherapy, maybe a cancer patient who is on treatment with low immunity, are actually being predisposed to pneumonia.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Akonde, for taking our time to be here with us on the program. But before we wrap it up, I'd just like you to give a word of advice to our listeners out there. What would be your advice to them to protecting themselves against pneumonia?
Okay, it's good we are talking about pneumonia, because November 12th is usually a day where the whole world, the World Health Organization normally mark World Pneumonia Day. So we would like to encourage people to go along with us as we sensitize people on air, on radio, on TV, even in our print media. Even in the community, we have presence of people who will be talking to you about pneumonia prevention, what you can do to prevent and protect yourself and your loved ones from having pneumonia. So on the 12th of November, which is this Saturday, so we're going to go out and talk more about this particular disease, how we can protect and prevent ourselves from coming down with this. Most importantly, caregivers, mothers, fathers should ensure that their wards are vaccinated against pneumonia, because this is the single leading cause of death of children all over the world. And Nigeria is one of the countries with the highest death rates, in company of Pakistan, Ethiopia, and Democratic Republic of Congo. So, you know, these are the leading countries that contribute over 75% of deaths to pneumonia. So we don't want our children to die. So please immunize your children and ensure they meet up to date and their immunization card are well up to date. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akonde. We sincerely appreciate your presence. Thank you very much for taking our time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here now.
Thank you. Well, that is how much we can take on the program today. Do remember that you can take the pneumonia vaccine and your children and the elderly to prevent yourselves from contracting pneumonia. Do keep it a date with us same time next week. I am your host, Lois Apasambo. Do stay safe.